All right, so let's continue on with venture capital and just investment in general. So, what's the current state? So, investment's been quite big within virtual reality so far. So, per Crunchbase, it's gone down recently, so there's only 200 million in funding in Q1 of 2017, but it was at a peak of over $1 billion in Q1 of last year, 2016. So, quite a bit of money really focused on the space, focused on virtual reality, augmented reality, that whole space. A lot of developers, a lot of different technology, a lot of hardware, all kinds of different things. But a lot of investment right now, we see that really improving. Now, there's been no IPOs in this space. It's early days, so that's not entirely unexpected. Although there has been one. So Snapchat really is transitioning to an augmented reality company, even though they haven't been that to date. Now, the largest acquisition by far has been Oculus, and that was $2 billion by Facebook a couple of years ago. Now, aside from Oculus, the leading investments have been in a couple different companies. So in a company called MindMaze, and what they do is they combine VR and neuroscience. Really interesting, cool company, and they got a big valuation. Magic Leap, which is creating some really cool augmented reality imagery. Definitely something to check out because, gosh, that is definitely a very innovative company. And then Blipper, which is also creating augmented reality. So these have been the three biggest ones to date. Now, the biggest tech companies are almost all betting really big with their internal R&D and having entire product divisions dedicated to the VR and AR space. So that includes Facebook, Sony, HTC, Google, Samsung, Microsoft, Acer, HP, Apple. Everyone is doing it. And not only are they doing it, but they're saying big things about it. So they're making statements. The CEOs are going in front of investors, going in front of the media and saying, we really believe in this. And not only are they saying it, but they're putting money where their mouth is. They're putting billions of dollars into it. So if those people are doing it and they're at the forefront of technology, you know that the investment is quite big, and the venture capitalists, as we said, are following suit. So what's our prediction? So right now, we're in the midst of a technological revolution. There's so many different competing technologies right now. Our belief is that VR is going to be the most consistently profitable of the bunch. But the thing is, if someone creates a game-changing AI, if someone creates game-changing biotechnology where let's say they cured cancer, if somebody creates a robot that can go do all kinds of different things for us, those might be the biggest of all the different investments right now. That's going to have the biggest return for investors. So a lot of money is getting diverted into a lot of those different things. So we think that VR is going to be the most consistently profitable, but a lot of people are looking at that massive payoff. If someone does a game-changing AI, it's going to be the biggest VC win in history. So a lot of people are trying to do exactly that. Now, as we said, venture capital in general, we actually think it's underfinanced right now. Even though there's a lot of money going into these startup companies, there's just so much out there. There's so many great ideas and so much potential right now in all kinds of different revolutionary technologies. So VR and AR, we've talked about that. Robotics, artificial intelligence and machine learning. You have drones, 3D printing, biotech, fintech, blockchain, and so much more. There's just so much going on right now. It's a technological world, a technological revolution. We just don't think there's enough money being invested in all of the different things that are possible. So anyway, that's going to ultimately shortchange VR and AR. That's just the fact of the matter. Now, VR, like we said, is definitely underfunded right now, but we think it has the biggest market potential of any of the emerging technologies, except maybe biotech, because there's a lot of potential there as well. We think that as time goes on, as VR kind of hits that mass adoption level and people start to make fortunes in this, more money is going to flow there. As there's more of a viable path towards profitability, mass adoption, when there's more M&A activity, all of a sudden that's going to spur more investment. There's already a lot right now, but we see that accelerating into the future. Once it's a proven commodity, gosh, the sky's the limit in terms of how much people are going to invest. And not just tech companies, but other companies as well. Okay, let's move on to the media. So we'll cover this one quickly because the media, it's just an external communicator, but it does have an impact. So general media was very positive early on. It's a new technology. They were excited about it. They loved the weird stories and showing people's reaction. But it's been very negative in 2017 because, gosh, people keep on using this overhyped word. or other kind of negative commentary. All the things that we talked about before about how it's too expensive, there's not enough things and applications for it, it's just gaming, all these different things. But you know what? The criticism, like we said, is valid because it's an early adoption type of thing. Now, the tech media and VR specific websites are actually quite common. There's so much media associated with that industry. And they're primarily consumed by tech enthusiasts. So their outlook naturally is going to be very positive, and they cover VR in a lot of depth. So if you're looking to really get good coverage and really understand where the VR market is right now, there's a lot of good sources out there. But you don't want to depend on kind of that mainstream media that doesn't know a lot about it and tends to be a little more negative than they should. Now, tech CEOs have been very outspoken with their bullish views on VR's future, and that does get some good media coverage as well. So Mark Zuckerberg has called it the next big computing platform, and he has been on record as saying he plans another $3 billion worth of investment over the coming years. Tim Cook at Apple, he prefers AR, but he calls it a big idea like the smartphone. He says, I think AR is that big. It's huge. Obviously, the iPhone, as successful as it was, that's a very grand statement to make. And Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella has said the ultimate computer for me is mixed reality. So Microsoft, the biggest computer company there is, most valuable for such a long time, and he is ultimately saying that computers are going to evolve into this mixed reality, and that's going to be the ultimate computer. Very, very grandiose statements from some very successful people, very prominent people, and people that are close to the technology. So if you don't believe me, gosh, believe them. Okay, predictions. So the media doesn't really predict anything, ever. And they don't like to use anything complex. They use very simplistic terminology. So here's what's going to happen. We think they'll oversimplify it at first, kind of like they're doing right now. Their narrative's going to be around failures. They're going to be talking about overhype. They're going to really play up some of the really interesting, grandiose stories, but for the most part, that's what their narrative will be. Eventually, as the technology really gets to that mass adoption level, we think they'll cover the successes a lot more, very similar to how they did with PC and mobile. And we actually think they're going to contribute a bit to a hysteria, almost like the dot-com bubble. Once VR becomes this everyday thing and it's in everybody's lives, we expect that it's going to become almost a hysteria where people are making grandiose predictions about valuations and what it can become. And unfortunately, that might lead to something resembling a bubble. But that's down the line. We'll see whether it goes that route. And then finally, we think eventually media will be primarily consumed actually via VR. So all the people that really didn't know what they were talking about maybe spread either grandiose, exaggerated stories or overly pessimistic stories, well, they're going to be absorbed by VR, and they're going to be delivering the vast majority of their media over that medium. So just like online became the probably biggest source of people getting their media, we think VR eventually is going to merge into being that number one source. It may take a number of years, but it'll eventually get to that point. Now that's the macro prediction. For businesses, the media can be an extremely useful PR tool, and they publicize anything that sounds interesting. So the PR departments getting the media on their side to really publicize their stories and what they're doing in VR is going to be a really big thing to do. And there's going to be a lot of those stories in this space, so that's definitely going to occupy their attention and should occupy, if you're a business, your PR space. Okay, so we think that's what the media will be. The last topic we're going to talk about is industry use. So the current state, as we've said many times before, is mostly gaming. It's heavily invested in VR, and it really comprises about 90%, potentially more, of usage right now. VR is actually emerging in the cinema space as well. So there's an entire category already for VR films to be screened at all the film festivals, and then also for them to receive awards. Interesting stuff there, and a lot of people within that sort of an industry are really looking at that technology as a way to evolve the medium. Now, it's being used sparingly elsewhere. There's been a lot of virtual tours of property and real estate. There's been a bit of educational and training experiences sold over the marketplaces. There's been a lot of apps in terms of touring museums, cities, and other interesting attractions. There have been a couple basic marketing apps, few and far between, but there have been a couple examples of those. And there's been people setting up VR entertainment facilities in actual physical locations. So in places like malls or theme parks, people can pay and they can experience it for an hourly fee or per experience or whatever it may be. Different business models popping up all over the place. And that kind of makes sense because it is a cool experience, but it's a little bit too expensive for the average person at the moment. Now, there's investment and development in most of the other areas we predict will be disrupted, and it'll really pale in comparison to what's ahead. But the good news is there is investment. There are people working on some other areas besides gaming and cinema, so definitely something to keep your eye on in terms of what pops up in the coming years. So what are our predictions? What will pop up in the coming years? So we think it's going to make the following industries almost unrecognizable from their current state. Truly different from where they exist right now. So those industries are education, training, all the entertainment that are currently on 2D screens, so anything that's on PC, mobile, or TV, digital communication, and any content that's currently on a website, because we think we're going to have to migrate that over to a 3D space. Now, that's not all it's going to disrupt. It's not going to be unrecognizable, but it's also going to modify pretty substantially the following industries. We think it'll really disrupt marketing and sales and change the way that we think about it, very similar to how online marketing does right now. Healthcare is going to be revolutionized by this industry. Travel, real estate, customer service, and really every area of finance. So we think that if you're in any of those areas, you better pay very close attention to VR because it's going to be impacting you in the very near future. And it's going to impact other industries as well, but these are the probably biggest ones and the top of mind things that people are working on at the moment. So we've given a lot of predictions. We've talked about the current state, our observations, our research, our experiences, and the things we've been hearing within our network. We've talked about our predictions, and that's based on, again, things that we hear, but also things that we can just very easily predict based on data, based on what people are investing in, those sort of things. But if you don't believe us, then we really think you should do some reading of your own. And there's some really good analyst reports out there right now. So analysts in general have been quite positive about VR, and they say very similar things to what we predict in terms of the scope and size of the market. Now, we're probably one of the most bullish people out there in terms of what the market will become. And we really eclipse a lot of the other predictions, but don't get me wrong, they are very big. So here are a couple ones that you might want to check out on your own. We'll just give the headline news of what they ultimately say. So in 2017, 30% of consumer-facing Global 2000 companies will experiment with AR/VR as part of their marketing efforts. And then they go on to say interfaces are the essential gateway to customer engagement, and they are evolving much faster than many have predicted. IDC, who published this report, expects AR/VR to reach mass adoption levels by 2021. So 4 years, very much within the range we said, 3 to 5 years, when more than 1 billion people worldwide will regularly access apps, content, and data through an AR/VR platform. So IDC publishes this very detailed report. It's a bit expensive, but regardless, something very worthwhile to check out. DigiCapital forecasts a greater than $100 billion VRA market within 2021. So again, another 4-year period, and that $108 billion would more or less be mass adoption, so they agree with us as well. And then Goldman Sachs predicts a $100 billion VR/AR market and a $35 billion software market by 2025. So again, a very large prediction. They probably see it happening more so over the 8 to 10 year period, but regardless, it's pretty consistent with a lot of what we believe in. And if you go into the report, you research it a little bit more, you can see that they are saying a lot of the same things that we are, that it's going to disrupt education and healthcare, commerce, and all the different things we talked about. So a lot of very intelligent people who are well-connected, well-researched, who have put together the numbers, really agree with a lot of the things we say. So if you don't believe us, by all means, go and check out. You see the links right there. Check out these much more detailed reports, and they'll confirm a lot of it and hopefully allow you to make your own perspectives about each of these different topics. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit. Let's move on to the next video. We're going to get into a little bit more depth with some of our predictions.